Chapter 1. The night of the alley fight street was quieter than usual when Alyssa stepped out of the small bookstore where she worked. The air was cool and sharp, carrying the faint scent of rain that had not yet fallen. She tucked a stray curl behind her ear and adjusted the strap of her bag before starting her walk home. It was supposed to be an ordinary night. It did not stay that way for long. As she passed the mouth of an alley, a deep sound echoed off the brick walls. It was the sound of a fist meeting a body. Alyssa froze before she could stop herself. Curiosity stirred inside her, even though fear cold warm in her stomach. She took one step toward the alley and the shadows opened into a scene she was never meant to witness. 3 men were locked in a violent struggle. One man had already fallen to his knees and another stood over him with angry determination. But it was the third man who caught her attention. He moved with a focus that felt almost graceful despite the force behind every punch he threw. His presence commanded the entire alley, and yet something in the way he looked at his injured friend showed a softness at odds with the chaos around him. Alyssa should have looked away. She should have turned back onto the street and walked faster. Instead she stood rooted to the spot with her breath held still in her chest. Her heart pounded with fear, yet she saw something else. The man fought with ferocity, but not cruelty. His movements were controlled, even though his strength could have crushed bones. He was dangerous. He was also strangely gentle in the moments between each strike. The fight ended quickly. The 2 men who had come looking for trouble stumbled away bruised and rattled. The third man knelt beside his friend, and the anger that had filled his eyes moments ago faded into concern. He touched his friend's jaw with a care that surprised Alyssa. It was the kind of touch that came from someone who knew how to break things, but also knew exactly how to avoid causing pain. Without meaning to, Alyssa inhaled a little too loudly. The green-eyed man looked up sharply. Their eyes met. His expression shifted the moment he saw her. Surprise flickered first, then something softer that she could not name. She felt exposed, as though he could see right through her. She had never been looked at like that by a stranger before. He stood slowly, and the movements of his broad shoulders made her pulse quicken. She expected hostility or an angry demand for her silence. Instead, he took one step closer, but stopped as if he did not want to frighten her. The dim glow from a street lamp touched his features, revealing a face marked by both strength and weariness. His jaw was sharp, yet his eyes softened as they held hers. Alyssa swallowed hard. Her voice refused to work. She clutched her bag strap and forced herself to take a single step back. The man noticed and lifted his hands slightly in a gesture that reassured rather than threatened. He was dangerous. She could see that clearly. Yet something about him radiated a warmth that should not have existed in a place like this. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. His voice was deep but strangely calm. It sounded like someone who had spent a lifetime carrying things no one else could carry. Alyssa nodded even though her hands trembled. She wanted to look away, but her eyes stayed locked on his. She wondered how someone capable of such violence could speak with such gentleness. She wondered why she felt more drawn to him than afraid. A loud siren wailed from the far end of the street. The moment shattered. The man turned toward the sound, then looked back at her with a final unreadable glance. He murmured a soft command to his friend, and together they stepped deeper into the alley until they disappeared into the shadows. Alyssa finally remembered how to breathe. She touched her chest as her heart thudded against her ribs. She knew she should forget what she had seen. She knew she should never think of that man again. But as she walked away, her mind replayed the softness in his eyes. The contradiction unsettled her in a way she could not understand. A violent man should not have hands that gentle. A violent man should not look at her like she was something fragile he did not want to break. And yet he had. She felt it lingering in every step she took toward home. The night had changed. Something had begun. Chapter 2. The man behind the violence. Alyssa woke the next morning with the image of the green-eyed stranger still imprinted on her mind. She lay in bed for a long moment trying to steady the flutter in her chest. It made no sense. She had seen something terrifying. She should have been shaken. Instead she felt a strange pull she could not explain. His eyes had followed her into her dreams. His voice echoed softly in her thoughts. She tried to push it all aside as she prepared for work. She brewed her morning tea and sat by the window, where sunlight spilled across her kitchen table. Usually this quiet moment grounded her and brought her comfort. Today the warmth did nothing to calm her. She kept tracing the memory of how gently he had touched his injured friend. That small gesture had unsettled her more than the fight itself. At the same time, 2 streets away, Lorenzo Vega stood in front of his bathroom mirror with a heavy expression. He splashed cold water over his face and watched droplets slide down his jaw. He had fought dozens of men in his life and had never once cared who watched. But last night was different. A woman had seen him. Not just any woman, but a woman whose eyes had held no fear. He could not get her out of his head. He leaned forward and gripped the edges of the sink until his knuckles turned white. He tried to dismiss the memory of her soft gaze. He tried to remind himself that he did not belong near someone like her. His world was full of danger and violence. Hers was filled with books and quiet evenings. It was best if he forgot her. Yet fate had other plans. Later that afternoon, Alyssa reached into her bag at the bookstore and felt her stomach drop. Her wallet was missing. She checked every pocket, and then her coat, and then her desk drawer. Panic rose inside her. She remembered bumping into the wall when she backed away from the alley. She must have dropped it there without noticing. She stepped outside and hurried toward the street corner, hoping she had simply misplaced it at work. As she rounded the corner, she stopped abruptly. A tall figure stood beside the lamppost, with something black held loosely in his hand. It was her wallet. Her breath caught when the man turned his head and she recognized him instantly. Lorenzo looked different, without the dim alley shadows. Sunlight drew out the warm undertones of his skin and highlighted the tired heaviness beneath his eyes. He stood still as if unsure of what to do. It struck her that he might be just as nervous as she was. "You dropped this last night," he said softly as he held the wallet out to her. His voice was calm again. Slow, grounded. Alyssa stepped forward cautiously and reached for it. Her fingers brushed his, and a spark rushed up her arm. She pulled her hand back a little too quickly. Lorenzo noticed and lowered his gaze for a moment. "Thank you," she murmured. She did not know what else to say. Her heart was doing far too much for such a simple interaction. "You should be more careful around that alley," he replied. Something like concern edged into his eyes. "It is not a safe place." She nodded. She had known that long before last night, but hearing it from him made it feel different. She studied him quietly and saw tension in the set of his shoulders, as though he expected her to judge him for what she had seen. "I am sorry you had to witness that," he added in a low voice. "I do not like people seeing me like that." Alyssa surprised herself when she answered. "I saw more than the fight," she said gently. "I saw you check on your friend. You were careful with him." Lorenzo looked at her with a mixture of confusion and something warmer. Most people only ever saw the fists he used. No one ever noticed the tenderness afterward. Her words disarmed him. He let out a slow breath. He looked as if he wanted to step closer, but held himself back out of respect for her comfort. Alyssa felt a strange safety in his presence. Despite everything, she was not afraid. Before either of them could speak again, a car passed by with loud music that snapped the moment in half. Alyssa glanced toward the sound, then back at him, but Lorenzo straightened as if reminded of something dark pulling him away from this fragile connection. "I should go," he said gently. "I did not want you to worry about your wallet. That is all." But as he turned, she felt a sudden panic rise inside her. She did not want the moment to end. She did not want him to leave with that distance in his eyes. "Lorenzo," she called out softly, and he paused. She could not explain it, but she needed him to know she was not afraid. not of him. Not of what she had seen. Thank you for bringing it back, she said with more warmth this time. He looked over his shoulder. A faint flicker of emotion passed through his eyes. Gratitude, relief, something beginning. He nodded once, then walked away with measured steps that told her he was trying not to look back. Alyssa held her wallet against her chest and felt her pulse thrum with new energy. She had the strange sense that this was not the last time they would meet, and she knew deep inside that she did not want it to be. Chapter 3. A protective instinct awakened. Alyssa tried to settle back into her routine, but her thoughts kept drifting to Lorenzo. Every time she passed the alley, her steps slowed. She told herself she was only curious. She told herself she hoped she would not see another fight. Deep down she knew she was hoping to see him. Lorenzo tried even harder to forget her. He threw himself into work and avoided the streets near the bookstore. But the memory of her steady gaze stayed with him. It softened something inside him that had been hard for years. He did not want that softness. He did not trust it. Yet he could not push it away. One evening Alyssa left work and noticed two men loitering near her building. Their voices were low and unfriendly. She felt the air shift down her. Her steps faltered. She told herself to stay calm as she walked past them, but her heart thudded in her chest. Before the men could move closer, a shadow stepped between them and her. Lorenzo emerged from the darker side of the street with a steady stride. His expression was unreadable, but his presence changed everything. The two men stiffened at the sight of him. They muttered something under their breath and backed away as if they knew better than to challenge him. Alyssa stared at him with surprise and a strange mix of relief and confusion. Lorenzo ignored the men completely. His attention was fixed on hers. He approached with slow, careful steps. "Are you all right?" he asked. His voice was quiet, but the strength in it wrapped around her like a shield. "Yes," she whispered, though her breath was unsteady. "Thank you." Lorenzo looked around once more, as if checking the area for danger. Something heavy pressed into his features, a warning, a worry, a need to protect her that he did not fully understand. "This neighborhood is changing," he said softly. "Trouble is starting to spill over from places it should not reach. Be careful walking alone at night." Alyssa nodded, but her eyes stayed on him. She could see the tension in his jaw. She could see the silent questions he wanted to ask but held back. She wondered why someone who lived in violence could still look at her with so much concern. Lorenzo turned as if to leave but paused. His voice dropped even lower. "I was nearby only by chance, but I am glad I was here." Her heart fluttered at the quiet honesty in his tone. He walked away before she could respond. Alyssa watched him until he disappeared around the corner. She touched her chest and felt the same pull she had felt the first night she saw him. It was becoming harder to deny. He frightened her world. He softened her heart. Chapter 4. Coffee, comfort, and a confession. Alyssa reached the small corner cafe earlier than usual the next morning. She had gone there for years, always choosing the same seat near the window where she could watch the quiet movement of the street. It was her safe place, her familiar place. But today she felt restless. Her thoughts kept circling back to Lorenzo, and the way he had stepped between her and danger, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. She wrapped her hands around her warm cup and tried to settle her mind. The bell above the door chimed softly. She looked up without any real expectation, and then stopped breathing for a moment. Lorenzo stood in the doorway. He did not move at first. His eyes scanned the cafe until they landed on her. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, followed by something gentler. He looked almost unsure whether he should approach. Alyssa gave him a small smile. It was enough. He walked over with slow steps and stopped beside her table. "May I sit?" he asked quietly. "Yes," she said before she could think. "Please." He took the seat across from her. For a moment neither of them spoke. The warm scent of coffee filled the space between them as sunlight poured through the window and softened the lines of his face. Alyssa noticed again that he always carried a kind of heaviness, as if he had lived a life that demanded too much from him. I did not expect to see you here, Lorenzo said, with a faint touch of a smile. This is my morning place, Alyssa replied. I come here to feel calm. You look calm, he said gently, but there was curiosity in his eyes, as if he sensed more beneath the surface. She studied him for a moment. He looked tired. Not physically, but in a way people look when they have been carrying their own battles for too long. You seemed different last night, she said softly. Not the way you were fighting, but after. When you looked at me. Lorenzo lowered his gaze to the table. The faint tension in his shoulders returned. I am not proud of what you saw. I have done things I cannot erase. I do what I must to protect the people I care about. That is the life I know. Alyssa took in his words with slow understanding. She sensed how carefully he was choosing each one. She sensed the weight behind them. You chose survival, she said, not violence. There is a difference. He looked at her again with a quiet shock, as if no one had spoken to him that way before. His voice dropped even lower. I do not want you to think I am dangerous to you. I do not, she answered without hesitation. The silence that followed was warm, rather than awkward. Lorenzo leaned back slightly, easing some of the strain in his posture. He noticed the book on the table and picked it up gently. You like stories, he said. I love them, Alyssa replied. They give me a place to breathe. He nodded slowly. I never had time for stories. I had to grow up fast, maybe too fast. There was no room for quiet things. She felt the softness in the confession and her heart stirred. He was letting her see something raw, something rarely shared. You have room now, she whispered. Lorenzo looked at her with an expression she had never seen from him before. It was not fear. It was not surprise. It was something like hope. Something he did not know how to hold. Their coffees arrived, and they talked for a long time. Something delicate grew between them, built on honest words and small glances that lingered longer than they should. Alyssa learned that he lived alone, that he worked constantly, that he carried burdens he never asked for. Lorenzo learned that she valued quiet moments because she had lived through years of chaos in her past. By the time they stood to leave, something inside both of them had shifted. Lorenzo opened the door for her and stepped into the soft morning light. He looked at her as though she was the first peaceful moment he had seen in years. I enjoyed this, he said gently. So did I. Their paths separated at the corner, but Alyssa felt his presence long after he walked away. She touched the strap of her bag and smiled to herself with a warmth she had not felt in a long time. Something was changing. Something tender was forming. Something neither of them could ignore anymore. Chapter 5. Touches that do not hurt. Days that followed felt different for Alyssa. Lorenzo's presence lingered in her thoughts in a way that felt warm, rather than alarming. She began to notice the quiet comfort she felt whenever she remembered his voice or the careful way he looked at her. One evening her kitchen light began to flicker. She stepped onto a chair to reach the bulb, but before she could fix it a knock sounded at her door. She opened it and nearly lost her balance when she saw Lorenzo standing there. I was nearby, he said gently. I thought I should check on you. Alyssa let him in. He saw the chair and the broken light and walked toward it without a word. His movements were steady and patient. He changed the bulb with hands that had once delivered force, but now moved with complete care. When he finished, he stepped down and looked at her. His gaze held something tender, something he did not try to hide anymore. You should not climb on chairs like that, he said softly. You could fall. She laughed lightly. You talk like you were responsible for keeping me safe. He grew quiet. His eyes softened. Maybe I am. A gentle stillness filled the room. Alyssa felt her breath catch as he reached out and brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was incredibly soft, softer than she ever imagined from someone who lived in violence. You always touch so carefully, she whispered. I do not want to hurt you, he murmured. Their eyes stayed locked for a long moment. She felt the warmth of his nearness settle deep inside her. She felt the tension between them grow stronger and more certain. Something was blooming. Something neither of them dared name yet. Chapter 6. The threat that changes everything. Lorenzo began to feel a quiet peace settle into his days, something he had not known in years. Every moment with Alyssa softened the edges of his hard world, but peace never lasted long in his life. His past always found a way to claw its way back. One night he received a call that shifted the ground beneath him. A rival group had started asking questions. They had noticed the changes in his routine. They had noticed that he lingered near the quiet streets where Alyssa lived. They wanted to know who she was. They wanted to know why Lorenzo cared. He felt fear in a way he was not used to. It was not fear for himself. It was fear for her. Alyssa sensed something different the next time she saw him. He stood a little farther away. His voice was steady, but distant. His eyes carried a warning. He had not spoken aloud. Is something wrong? She asked. Lorenzo hesitated before answering. There are people who watch what I do. They do not like when someone becomes important to me. It puts you in danger. Alyssa felt her chest tighten. She stepped closer, but he took a small step back. The distance hurt more than she expected. Lorenzo continued in a quiet, strained voice. I need to keep you safe, and the way to do that is to stay away for a while. She shook her head. You think that will make me feel safe? Losing you does not feel safe at all. His jaw tightened. I wish it did not have to be like this, but I cannot let you be pulled into my world. I will not risk you. A heavy silence stretched between them. Alyssa felt something break inside her. She reached for his hand, but he pulled his away gently, as if touching her would shatter his resolve. I am sorry, he whispered. And then he left before she could say anything else. Alyssa watched him walk away, with a sinking ache in her chest. She understood his fear. She understood his world was filled with danger, but understanding did not ease the hollow quiet that settled around her. For the first time she realized how deeply she had let him in, and how much it hurt to lose him. Chapter 7. Running toward danger for love. Alyssa had tried to keep her life steady while Lorenzo stayed distant. She missed him in ways she could not name. She thought of his hands, his voice, the strange gentleness he carried even in a dangerous world. She told herself she could wait, that she could stay safe. But safety was a fragile illusion. One evening, as she walked home from the bookstore, she felt the presence of strangers following her. Panic rose in her chest. She turned a corner and suddenly the alley from the first night loomed ahead. Men from Lorenzo's enemies appeared from the shadows. Her bag fell from her shoulder and she froze, realizing too late that she was trapped. Before she could scream, a figure moved with terrifying speed and force. Lorenzo emerged from the darkness. His green eyes blazed as he took in the scene. He did not hesitate. He fought through the men with brutal precision. Each movement carried both danger and care. He shielded her, keeping her safe even as fists and knives flew around him. Alyssa watched, heart pounding, as the man she had feared and admired in equal measure revealed the full extent of his violence. But it was not violence for its own sake. Every strike, every push, every shove was meant to protect her. She saw the desperation in his eyes, the fear that he might fail, the love he could not yet name. When the chaos finally ended, they were both breathing heavily. Lorenzo pressed her back against a wall, checking for injuries. His hands shook slightly, unsteady from adrenaline and worry. Are you hurt? He asked, voice low and strained. I am fine, she whispered. Even as her heart refused to settle, he kept his hands on her shoulders for a long moment, grounding himself as much as her. The street around them was quiet now, but the danger had left a mark deeper than any wound. Alyssa realized in that instant that she did not want him to stay away. She did not want fear to keep them apart. She needed him, even knowing the peril that followed. Lorenzo looked into her eyes, seeing her fear, her courage, and the bond that had formed between them. He knew that keeping her safe might cost him everything else, but he would not hesitate. Again, in that night of chaos, both of them understood something undeniable. Love could not wait. Love demanded they run toward danger together. Chapter 8. The softest moment in the hardest night. Lorenzo carried Alyssa through the quiet streets to a small safe house he had used in emergencies before. Her arm pressed against his chest. She felt both terror and relief. She had never been so close to him while danger still lingered in the air. He set her down gently and guided her to a chair. Her hand trembled as she touched the wound on her arm. He knelt before her, his large hands carefully inspecting the bruise. Each movement was deliberate and slow, a stark contrast to the violence he had used to reach her. "I am sorry," he murmured. "Caring for you scares me more than any fight I have ever faced." Alyssa looked at him, her heart softening. She had seen his strength and his fury. She had also seen the way he protected others. Now she saw a vulnerability he rarely allowed anyone to witness. "Your hands are gentle," she whispered. "Even when everything else is chaos." He gave her a small, tense smile. "I do not want to hurt you." The room was quiet except for their breaths. Lorenzo's hands lingered over hers as he applied ointment to the wound. She felt the contrast between the violence he wielded and the care he gave her. It was confusing, intoxicating, and utterly real. "I have never felt like this before," he confessed. "I have never wanted someone more than I want to keep you safe." Alyssa's chest swelled with emotion. She reached up and brushed his hair from his forehead. "I understand now. You are not just the man who fights. You are the man who can hold." For a long moment, they remained like that. He with trembling hands full of care, and she with a heart wide open to the tenderness he had hidden all along. In that soft, quiet space, they found a new understanding. Even in a violent world, love could exist. Even in a hardened man, gentleness could live. Chapter 9. Choosing each other despite the world. Alyssa refused to let fear dictate her life any longer. Lorenzo's absence had left a quiet ache in her chest. She realized that no safety measure, no distance, could erase the bond that had grown between them. Lorenzo watched her from a distance, struggling with the weight of his world. He wanted to protect her at any cost, but he also wanted something else he had never allowed himself to feel fully: the freedom to love without restraint. They met one evening in the park where the streetlights cast soft golden pools across the pavement. Alyssa approached first, her steps confident despite the lingering fear. "I will not let you stay away," she said firmly. "I cannot pretend I am safe without you." Lorenzo looked at her, green eyes heavy with both relief and worry. He had spent his life avoiding attachments, avoiding vulnerability, but now he understood that she was worth every risk. "I cannot promise the world will be safe," he admitted, "but I can promise you that I will never let anyone harm you if I can stop it." Alyssa smiled softly. "That is all I need." They walked together slowly, side by side, letting the warmth of their hands brushing against each other speak for what words could not. For the first time in years, Lorenzo felt the possibility of a life without constant danger. Step by step, he began to cut ties with the parts of his past that had chained him to violence. Each action was difficult, each choice deliberate. Yet with Alyssa by his side, he felt courage he had never known before. Their love deepened not in grand gestures but in small moments of trust, laughter, and quiet companionship. Each touch, each shared look, strengthened the gentleness that had begun to bloom between them. By the end of that evening, they realized something undeniable. They had chosen each other, despite the dangers, despite the world that sought to keep them apart. Their hearts had decided, and nothing could undo that choice. Chapter 10. Gentle Hands. New Beginnings City felt different that morning. The sun poured over quiet streets and filled the air with warmth. He had spent years living in a world of violence and danger, but now every step he took toward Alyssa felt lighter. Every breath without fear was a gift. Alyssa waited for him in the small garden behind her apartment. Flowers bloomed along the edges, and the soft rustle of leaves created a gentle rhythm. She smiled as Lorenzo approached, noticing the way he walked without the burden of constant alertness. He stopped a few feet away and looked at her. There was no tension in his shoulders, no sharpness in his eyes, just a man who had fought and survived and chosen something better. He smiled faintly and held out his hands. Alyssa stepped closer and took them. His hands had once delivered force without mercy, but now they were soft and careful, warm in a way that made her chest swell. They fit together as if they had always belonged. "I cannot promise the past will stay buried forever," he said, "but I can promise that from now on, we build our life on gentleness and care." She nodded. 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐿, I believe you. I believe in us. Alyssa leaned her head against his shoulder. "I never thought someone like you could be mine," she whispered. Lorenzo tilted his head, resting his forehead lightly against hers. "And I never thought someone like you could teach me how to be gentle," he said softly. And in that new beginning, peace was no longer a distant dream. It was real. It was theirs. It was love. They had discovered that strength could coexist with tenderness. For the first time, Lorenzo felt truly free. Alyssa felt truly safe. Together, they stepped forward into a life neither of them could have imagined before. And in 𝐻